Okay, in the last video we were talking about the ideological superstructure and the economic base, and there's something kind of cursorily related to that that we'll touch on a little bit more, but it has to do with this idea, and I don't know if this is related explicitly to the idea of wokeism, but I think it is. Marx's idea of false consciousness. Marx's idea of false consciousness. That is, what is false consciousness for Marx? Marx thinks that in a capitalist structure, it conceals, the capitalist culture conceals oppression and victimization. Namely, the oppressor and oppressed narrative is concealed. That's what false consciousness is. Oppression is hidden. Okay? The genius of capitalism, Marx thinks, is that it perpetuates a narrative in which it conceals its oppression, or capitalism conceals the oppression. An example of this would be something like, I don't know, where is this phone made? Well, it's made in a sweatshop in a third world country, and so where are these clothes made? Things like this. We don't see that every day. I remember 10 years ago or so reading the news on the computer and reading about how people were in a factory in China where they were making iPads or something like that, and people were locked in there for 48 hours or something, totally inhumane. And I remember reading that, but I remember saying, oh, look what Kanye West is doing, and I just completely avoided that. In other words, it's so distant, it wasn't even real to me 10 years ago. And I think that would highlight Marx's point about capitalism concealing oppression. But the idea of false consciousness is that it conceals this oppression and hides the true relations of exploitation, the relation between owner and worker. Now, why did I connect that with wokeism or something like that? Well, you can think of woke or being awake, at least this is 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago when it first came out. It was sort of a response to what Marx would call false consciousness, that is, awakening people to forms of victimization that are concealed, some kind of systemic privilege, systemic classism, systemic racism, systemic sexism, for example. And we have to ask ourselves, what do we mean by that term systemic? Well, I think now Marx would say, or at least when people use that term, they mean the ways in which you can't particularly point to a law or particular treatment that is actually racist or sexist or oppressive, and victimizing, but nevertheless that it happens. Now, so we'll stop there in this video, but I think Marx's notion of false consciousness is what people mean by the concealed dimensions of oppression now, and the response to that would be to become woke or something like that. I think that's initially what that term meant. Maybe it doesn't mean that now, but nevertheless you can see the roots of that in Marx's understanding of false consciousness.